Hello, it's me. Welcome to the video. Since the last time we spoke and caught up, I have been plugging away at I've been plugging away at my paper manuscript, and I'm doing something a little bit different this time, which I think is also making the process go a little bit slower, but I'm sure it'll all even out in the end. What I'm essentially doing is editing the paper manuscript alongside editing the digital manuscript. I'll do a couple chapters editing the paper version, and then I'll switch over to my computer and transcribe my edits into the digital version. Just thought I would switch things up, try something new. I've never done it before. I've always just done kind of like one draft at a time, but this way I'm finding to be, so far it's going good. Things are still fresh in my mind, you know what I mean? Especially if I create notes for myself, you know, I'm not going back to them so far into the future where I forget what the heck I was even talking about, which has happened before. Today will be no exception. We're gonna go out into the world, do some editing, but first I thought I would delve into my process a little bit. First up, we have my Cherub House Rules cheat sheet. You would have seen this blank, but now it is all semi-filled out. I have figured out my color coding system for when I'm editing. Basically, for notes, I just use a red pen. Helps separate it from the black ink, obviously. Next up, I will use a yellow highlighter to highlight different character attributes, especially when a character is first getting introduced, or let's say I'm diving into their backstory. It's just fun for me to get an idea of how much I'm talking about the characters themselves and molding them into what could be real people. Pink I am using for the abilities of my characters. Certain ghosts have certain quirks, you might say, that they have picked up over time, things that may or may not reflect how they were in life, how they see themselves, or how they think the world sees them. And obviously this is very specific to me because I'm writing a sort of supernatural book. But if you're writing a book with magical elements, having a color designated to show and to keep rules in line, I think be very helpful. Next up is a green highlighter. This again is something that's semi-specific to me. I'm using green to indicate anytime weather is brought up. Because my story is set in a cemetery, open to the elements all the time, every day. Weather is kind of important for setting the mood and also establishing like time passing. Oh my god, the sun's out, let's highlight that. You know what I mean? Blue I am using when I talk specifically about the cemetery. As I've mentioned before, my cemetery and the narrator kind of have characters of their own in a way. I don't know if this is going to be helpful at some point later on. I feel like if anything, it's keeping the cemetery in track. On track? In track? What's the word I'm looking for? Keeping myself on track with the cemetery at all times. And finally, the most important highlighter I have come to find is my orange highlighter. This is what I use when there's a word or a phrase that doesn't quite fit the vibe that I'm going for in my mind. I want to make sure each word describes that vibe, so I use this a lot. Coincidentally, this has led to another page that I have added to my little packet of pages that I keep with me while I edit. Words that I know I use too much. Obviously, as writers, we gravitate towards certain words or phrases, whether it be something that we grew up with, or because if you're like me and you're describing an old, overgrown cemetery made out of stone and brick with graves and headstones. I'm just reading the list. It's chilly. You know, people have eyes, we notice that a lot. You just start using words a lot because it's easy to just put them in there. I kind of look at them as like filler words until I can go back and create something more creative. So while I'm going through and trying to catch everyone that I can, I know at the end of this draft, I'm gonna do like a whole Control F of the entire document and find each and every one of these words and make sure that each one is actually justified and there isn't a better replacement. And since we're going down the list of pages that I use while I'm editing, I've also have my map here. I started tracking people's movements, specifically my main character, Florence. It's fun to visualize her walking around the cemetery, much like you would visualize the hobbits on their quest to whatever, Lord of the Rings. I'm sorry, I don't know Lord of the Rings that well. I've been meaning to like read the books, but I'm sure something like this would be helpful for any fantasy map scenario. My character sheet is, I gotta be honest, I kind of knew I was gonna fall off with this one. This was created with all the best intentions, but I feel like at this point, I know my characters really well. If I was in maybe my first draft, this would be way more helpful, but I kind of stopped filling it out. So perhaps I will fill this out after this draft so I can make sure everything is very, very consistent. And one more thing before we get going, I just want to let you know how many pages in I'm in. I have edited and transcribed 36 pages of the total 96. What is that, like a third of the way in? And to be honest, I'm really getting down into like the nitty gritties of it. Each and every page for me is taking like anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes. These are what my pages are looking like. They're double columned. Some pages obviously are easier than others to get through. Some of them that I knew would need more work, I'm spending more time on. And then even when I'm transcribing them into my digital draft, you know, I'm adding things, I'm seeing even more things that I didn't write down. It's been nice to be able to like check and balance myself. But I'm very happy with the progress. I'm very happy with how it's turning out. I can't wait to finish this and sit down and just read it all through, turning off my like editing brain for a minute and just enjoying the story and making sure like, you know, it's not completely whack. With that, let's get going. It is 8:54 in the morning and I have not had coffee yet. So I'm a little like, okay, it's a different day. Do you want me to open the window? Before we get started for the day, I wanted to talk about dialogue. Because there's like, I have you on my cat's tower and there's hair everywhere. I have been working on this passage of dialogue for like the past 2 days and I think I've boiled it down to why. So basically there's like a spectrum in dialogue, right? You have the hyper realistic, the as close to like human speech as possible. Typically this kind of writing is completely insufferable, but I guess some people enjoy it. And then you have like the really unrealistic. People don't talk like that in real life, but it's okay because the whole story has that same sort of vibe. Personally, I don't like the super realistic style of dialogue. However, I can get behind it if the whole story is written like that, if it fits within the world that the author has created. And at this point in my editing, I have a very clear view of the world, the characters within it, the narrator's voice, the style of writing, obviously. And I've come to kind of see that my first 2 drafts of dialogue basically don't quite fit with the story that I have constructed. And now it is my job as the writer and editor to go in and match up these dialogues, beef them up in a way that matches the rest of the tone of the story. Which really, you know, is not like news. Your first run at dialogue should not be your final version. I find that when I'm writing first drafts, it's mostly about getting the beats in there, getting the actions, the conversations that need to happen, basically as like bluntly as possible in order to progress the story. And editing gives you the ability to go in and rewrite and make things not so, I guess, obvious. Here's a great example. It's actually dialogue I was working on yesterday. Our main character, Florence, is having a little spat with another character, Sylvain. He's pompous, he's annoying, and she loves to mess with him. Sylvain had like walked in, like butted his way into a conversation Florence was having with another character, Luca. Florence turns to him, and originally she said, "Can we help you with something, Sylvain? Maybe give you directions back to your hole in the ground," because he's dead. And like, that's good, that's fine, but it's basic and it doesn't really add like anything substantial. It's a phrase that you would gloss over if you were reading. That's something like somebody would say in real life because they can't think of anything more like, After some reflection, I changed it to, "Need to refill your quota of attention, Sylvain? Or perhaps you need directions to your hole in the ground." This character, he thrives on attention. He thrives on being, you know, the biggest and the baddest within his group of friends. She knows that and she wants to play on that. That's what I mean about beefing up dialogue, tailoring it not only to the person speaking, but also the person receiving the words and fitting it within the dynamics of your story. Florence has a lot of witty one-liners that I wish I could be that quick in real life, but that's the beauty of writing. You get to go back and rewrite things, not only make the story more interesting, but also have your reader more invested and your reader think it's more interesting and keep them engaged. And with that, I need a coffee. It is dreary outside, and if I don't leave the house soon, I might just go back to bed.